This is Restless. Welcome back to Restless, where for the sake of what can be, we are unburdened by what has been. I am your host, Matt Klein, joined by Pastor Michael Bowman. Michael Bowman, how unburdened by what has been are you doing today?
I'm pretty unburdened. I feel pretty free. I don't know. Actually, with everything going on in our country that maybe we'll save for Conspiracy Corner, maybe I do feel burdened. Maybe that's not true that I feel unburdened. But my son just brought me a LaCroix. Thanks, Haddon. Do you want to say hi to Restless? Do you want to say hi to all the people on Restless? This is my son, Haddon. Well, right now it's Pastor Klein, but we're recording this, so they're going to hear your voice. A bunch of people, probably 1,000 people,
what message
are going to hear your voice.
What message do you want to give to the world?
Yeah, what message do you want to give to the world?
I'm about to read a gigantic book, and I just finished The Hobbit.
Boom.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool, everybody. All right, you can go. Love you. That'll show up. I'll show you. Remind me, and I'll show you when that comes out, buddy. Wait, close that door.
This is one of those ultra right-wing kids I learned about.
That's right. He's already reading The Hobbit. He's a radical.
But Pastor Michael, today we will be this episode of Restless is brought to you by Conspiracy Corner. So,
it is.
Yes, it is.
Awesome.
If you are a person who doesn't know what Conspiracy Corner is, it means you have never joined our Patreon. So, Pastor Michael, give people a glimpse of what do we do in the Conspiracy Corner?
Conspiracy Corner really is just an outlet for Matt and I to talk about different conspiracy theories, which is really enjoyable and fun. We talk about how you can't trust dentists, and we talk about being red snapper pilled, and there's if you don't know what those things might mean even, well, this might be for you, or it really isn't for you.
That's right. That's right. But today, Pastor Michael, in the theme of unburdening ourselves from the past and taking all of our listeners to a Conspiracy Corner, we are going to be reacting to a viral clip from the Tucker Carlson show. No, not with he who shall not be named, Doug Wilson, but from what's the guy's name? What's the country music star's name? Something Rich was on.
I don't even know
this show.
I don't know.
Let me look this
country
up.
Music people.
I
didn't know who this guy was when I saw the clip.
I have the technology here in my studio to figure out who has been on the Tucker Carlson show. And
we have our people on it right now, telling us, feeding us the information.
Yes, exactly. Our producer, John Rich. John Rich was the country music star, as everyone shouted at their podcast.
Everybody's like, how don't you know?
And they discussed dispensationalism. And they discussed it, we will say, in a conspiratorial way. So we are going to react to this clip because, Pastor Michael, do you think, we'll just give you a yay, nay, or nuance. Is it time for us to move on from dispensationalism in American evangelicalism?
Yeah, of course, right? Yeah, it is. It's been time to move on for a long time. We passed it's time to move on about 150 years ago.
Well, I think John Rich would agree with you based on what he said, and it also seems that Tucker Carlson would. But again, the reason I think this is an interesting clip for us to react to is likely on the biggest stage where a pretty intramural Christian idea can be discussed. This dispensationalism and needing to be unburdened of it was discussed in this environment. And then the video clip.
Oh, sorry. Do you know anything about John Rich? Like, is he? I mean, he must be some kind of Christian, professed believer.
Professed believer, I would say. You know how country music stars are, all Christians. Definitely.
Somebody message us or something and tell us in the Patreon group chat if you know anything about John Rich and his background, because I literally know nothing.
our technology and dedicated group of producers do not have the technology to learn about the faith of John Rich in real time. So we will have to leave that out for now. And then the video clip of this interview went viral on X. And it was reacted to negatively, it was reacted to positively, and it was reacted to with nuance. Pastor Michael and we hope to be getting an interview with a guy who wrote a recent book called The Rise and Fall of Dispensationalism. Just so you know, if you write anything with the rise and fall in its title, we want you on the show. Love to have you on the show. But I think this clip will provide us some interesting things. So the clip is a minute long. Michael, do you think the best way to do this is play it in its entirety and then discuss it?
Yeah, it's only a minute. So let's play the whole thing, and then we could go back through as we need to.
Great. All right. We will see the video. You, the listener, will not. I guess we could probably release this one as a video show, but
only if we have time.
Yeah,
we're not promising it, but we might.
That's right. So this is a clip from the Tucker Carlson show interviewing John Rich. Fair use. I love everybody.
What you're saying is the Scofield Bible, its theology is deceptive.
A very wealthy, very charismatic preacher named John Darby came with this doctrine that's now referred to as the secret rapture or the pre-tribulation rapture. And guess who he was connected to, by the way? The Rothschilds.
Interesting.
Have you ever heard of a Scofield Bible?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So C.I. Scofield was basically a student of John Darby, and he adopted that part of the doctrine, and he incorporated that into the Bible. It was the first Bible ever made that had study notes with it. It became so popular, every Christian was reading it, every minister was reading it, including me, including my own father. For a long time, that's what we believed too. But when you start actually going back and reading line by line by line what is said that will be leading up to Jesus coming back, which is when the rapture happens, it's the inverse of what John Darby put down. My sense was the Scofield stuff, which has had massive implications for our foreign policy, for example, and in our domestic politics, was probably a lie. I do know that translation or that commentary on the Bible has had massive effects on our politics that have been very, very negative and resulted in the deaths of a lot of people. What you're saying is...
So, Pastor Michael, how do you want to give us your opening thoughts on the clip that we just watched here?
Yeah. Oh boy. Where to start? Number one, I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that where John Rich is potentially getting this is from the book Bad Religion by Ross Douthat of the New York Times.
Okay.
He wrote this. This is a number of years ago now. I want to say this is like a decade ago. This book came out. I don't know that. Maybe he thought of this a different way, but that sounds almost exactly like a quote that I've even used before from Douthat. In fact, and I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but if you go back to when we either our first or at some point one of our interviews that we did with I'm blanking on so many names today.
Rob Mckenzie.
With Rob Mckenzie on dispensationalism, which you can go back and find that and get Rob's book because it's a great book if you want to understand dispensationalism. When we did that, I quote, like I don't know if I read a direct quote, but I at least paraphrase what Ross Douthat says about the Scofield Reference Bible, because that was where I first heard this, and I thought it was a super fascinating thing. I'm not sure at this point how accurate it is, but my understanding, at least from that book, is that yes, the Scofield Reference Bible was the first Bible to print the study notes on the page in the way that it did, right? In a way that was not as differentiated from the text as it had been in the past. And so what I hear him saying is basically that same thing, that it's right there, except the way that they keep saying it is like, this Bible translation, this Bible, like, that's not what it was, right? I mean, it was just the King James Bible. That's the translation. The Scofield Reference Bible simply had study notes in it. That's
Right.
That's what they were. However, they were right there where you would read, this is the, in some sense, maybe we could say the danger of a study Bible. The good of it is it could helpfully explain things that maybe you wouldn't know. The bad of it is you have something like the Scofield Reference Bible. If that's the Bible you're reading every day, then you don't just have the scripture, you have the teaching from somebody. And if it's in error, like the Scofield Reference Bible is on a lot of different points, and if its primary agenda is to teach dispensationalism, for instance, you're going to have that constantly interpreting what you're reading. And when you don't understand something, you're going to go down to those study notes or over to the side of those study notes, and you're going to start to assume, okay, this is what that means.
Right.
This is what these words mean. This is what this vision in Daniel means. This is what this bit of Revelation means. This is what Jesus meant when he gave the Olivet Discourse. You begin to make assumptions because of that. And so that's, potentially the bad in any study Bible, but like an obvious bad in the Scofield Reference Bible because of what it taught.
Yes. Yeah, so let's start with the tiny bit of fact checking, and then I'm going to explain why we can explain perhaps the controversy, and maybe after I do a bit of this fact checking, we'll explain why it doesn't really matter and why everyone who, like me, fact checked this in the way that they did probably are missing the point of what the impact of this video is.
Yeah.
So it is, the Scofield Reference Bible is not the first study Bible that ever existed. That is the Geneva Bible.
Yep.
Now, from what I understand, the Scofield Bible, as Michael said, has a lot more extensive notes in it, right?
Right. It is different. It was printed in a different way than had been before. So in that way, it was,
and
different.
It also had, as the Bible in my lap right now does, right, has the like cross references down the middle of the page. I don't know if it was the first one to do that, but obviously the Scofield Reference Bible did it in a way that chained together a dispensationalist understanding of all these texts, right?
Yep.
So it organized like the dispensationalist text groupings that are probably still used today. The other thing, right? Obviously, there's debate on how much Darby and Scofield agreed. Again, these are the things that Rob in his book really discusses well, understands the differences, and the ways in which they hang together. Now, the other thing John Rich says that Scofield came up with, or Darby came up with, was what he describes as the secret rapture. Obviously, they were coming up with something they called dispensationalism, and a prominent feature of that was the secret rapture. And they're using those things synonymously. And so, again, there's all these fact checks.
Yeah.
The reason those fact checks don't matter that I just made is the impact of what is being said here means the credibility and plausibility of dispensationalism is going away.
Yeah.
Is going away. And what's fascinating about this is obviously many people, both dispensationalists and reform people who don't like dispensationalism, they were saying we must handle these things on all of the merits of all of the exegetical arguments. But what's interesting is the plausibility here, and of course that's true, right? What the Bible says is true. But what's fascinating is what is coming up against it is that the people aren't, there's something shifting in the mindset that is not making these things seem plausible anymore.
Yeah, I mean, for so long, dispensationalism has been incredibly popular in American churches, in American evangelicalism. And I'm sure there's lots of different reasons that we could go into for that. And part of that, by the way, we've talked about this before, I think. Like, imagine that you were taught, and so you believe, in this dispensationalist understanding that, for instance, one of the marks of the end times is that Israel's going to be reconstituted as a nation state. And you have that in your mind as something that's going to happen. You have that before it happened, right? Before 1948.
Right.
And so imagine you've been growing, you've heard that for decades, and then it happens.
That's right.
After an incredibly cataclysmic world war, and then another cataclysmic world war, and you live through a depression in between. And then you have this happening, you would, and then and also, by the way, we're in the nuclear age. You would probably be so convinced of it. It didn't mean it was true, but that would be hard not to be convinced of. So I want to give some grace to dispensationalists, right? Especially an older school variety of dispensationalists who they experienced things that made this an incredibly plausible idea.
Absolutely. Now, what I want to point out is I agree with everything you just said, right? So the Scofield Reference Bible is originally published in 1909, right? What shot this thing to become as just exactly what Pastor Michael just said, what made this thing the dominant Bible that was being sold, right? 2 million copies or something like that are sold by the time of World War II, right? So in the span of about 30 years, 2 million copies of a certain reference Bible are sold. And again, Israel becoming a nation state would appear to validate all of the claims found in the dispensationalist framework. And so, but what's interesting about that, and I think we should have sympathy is, but what that means is the thing that made dispensationalism super attractive and super plausible wasn't actually an exegetical argument.
That's right.
It was a historical circumstance.
Yes.
And so we should not be surprised as circumstances, mindsets, and attitudes change, that it is no longer viewed as a super credible view. Now, it's going to take a long time because when a paradigm shifts, right, it's not an overnight thing.
Right.
But what this video tells me is that we are on a precipice here.
Yeah.
Now, let me deal with one more controversial claim in this. And then we'll deal with actually something in here that I think that is really helpful when discussing these things. That I can even validate from my own personal experience from my own family. We'll see if I tell that story here on the podcast. But the Rothschild family, the publishing of the Scofield Reference Bible. Pastor Michael, what would you? I don't know. What do you know much about this claim? I didn't realize this is a somewhat well-known conspiratorial claim about.
I don't know anything about it. So I don't really know hardly anything about the Rothschilds, but I do know that they show up a lot in conspiracy theories, right?
Yes.
I know that they are a prominent feature. So I should know more than I do. They're like a wealthy banking family, right? I mean, is that that goes way, way back?
Right. And I think they were I think they were also pretty fairly well-known Zionists, supporters of the cause of.
I think so.
Zionism would be and so again, right? If you say Rothschild, that's the sign we've entered the conspiracy corner. The moment that name is invoked, here we are, everybody.
Which doesn't mean we write it off, by the way. Hey, in Conspiracy Corner, we don't just write stuff off just because it sounds wild. We'll talk about it, but
right.
But yeah, it definitely means we've at least entered into that space.
That's right. And so, do you know anything about this claim?
I do not. So I don't know. Like, he just says it.
Right.
And maybe there's more in the actual interview. I haven't listened to it. I do very often listen to Tucker Carlson, but I haven't listened to this interview at all. I don't know if it's
heard
available.
it here, folks. Pastor Michael is one of those bad guys. Listening.
A lot of good interviews, by the way. A lot of good interviews.
So I'll say that I did very little research on this, but this was the part that everyone was talking about on Twitter, and I'm going to give it a what do we call this? The Snopes meter, right? The partially true. So here's the partially true thing. And this I can just say from my own experience. I'm not saying this because of something I believe, just because of literally what I know. The Christian support of Israel. And we talked about this when we talked about Mark Driscoll's sermon, his end time sermon based on the horrific attack on Israel and then the ongoing war in Palestine, and against these people.
And the demon named Hamas that he brings up. He
says
there's
Sorry, I forgot. Oh man, I can't
Hamas.
believe I forgot. There's a demon named Hamas.
There's literally, that's what it is. Which he does great, I'm sure, linguistic work to tie things together.
Oh man, I forgot. We really need to be unburdened I was unburdened by that past until you reminded me of it. And so we talked about that. There is a difference in what we might call political just war, would be support of a nation state like Israel and any conflict they would be in, right? You can look into the history of those conflicts and try and they're terribly complicated and tragic virtually on every side. And then there is what I think, especially among Christians, there has been a basic theological support for Israel.
Yeah.
That has been dependent on and related to a dispensationalist reading of the end times.
Correct.
And the belief that the people of God, that title is still a thing reserved for national Israel.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So I think because of that, because there is clearly a particular kind of support for Israel now based upon these theological developments that were new, right? Like that were
yes.
This is not something that you can, tie to long periods of history in the church. This is a very novel idea, historically speaking, not novel like last year, but it's very novel in the sense that this is not anything like any views that came before it. There are similarities, right? So there are other understandings and readings of the Bible that might include, some kind of revival amongst Jewish people or, a premillennial return of Christ, things like that. But not like dispensationalism, right? That is a novel view that had not existed before. So if you just take that information, that a novel theological view has led to significant political support for a particular group, it takes very little to turn that into a conspiracy.
Right.
Not saying that it is. I think that one of the things we talk about in Conspiracy Corner a lot is that there seems to be I think in part because people want to know that there's something calling the shots behind everything.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't have the Lord and they can't say, oh yeah, obviously the Lord is in control of all this, there's still this like weird attempt to take anything that happens and say, well, there has to be a direct connection to like somebody's conscious will made a decision to do this. And so you have to, if you don't have the Lord, you have to start finding that elsewhere. And so what that usually ends up being is, well, there's some kind of, shadowy cabal of figures or peoples or leaders, and they're calling all the shots for everything that happens. Like they have power, and it's some kind of weird, almost omniscient power that allows them to plan and strategize down through hundreds of years how exactly they're going to work these things out to whatever the end goal is, right? They're to accomplish some kind of nefarious purpose. And so you like to take this idea that dispensationalism has affected foreign policy to make that into a conspiracy. All it takes is a quick little, well, look, here's a name of people that are usually associated with that very idea of, deep control of people and governments, like the Rothschilds, and that's what it takes. But I don't know. So my understanding, I don't know that this is the case, but what I read, at least briefly, was that it's not like the Rothschilds commissioned this or something, but they owned the publishing house that did this. Is that correct? What did you learn?
I think that would be so this thing was published by Oxford Press. So again, a fairly obviously respected publishing house.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they owned it or they were this was just one of those one of the things that they gave money to. I don't know if it, again, right, with all the things that they have they've done that way. But so it's a little bit of a stretch to say they would have been involved in the promotion, editing, or whatever with this study Bible. But what's true about what he's saying is that political Zionism and dispensationalism are completely intertwined.
Yes.
Right? They're completely intertwined.
Yeah.
And that the relationship is probably symbiotic. Yep. Right? That there is
definitely
that it's not just theology led to a political outcome, but political desires also probably influenced the theological process that got there.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. There's a double hermeneutic going on where they're kind of informing each other.
Yes.
All the way. Yep. And if you read up or if you research anything about early Zionism and the early formation of the nation state of Israel, a lot of, especially the British support, came from British, basically evangelicals who had some dispensational type views.
Right. And so it is, again, right, this is why some of these specific fact checks are not that important. Now, what I think, so I find this all interesting. And I will say that if you are wondering, perhaps as a Christian, maybe you someday wake up in a conspiracy corner where you wonder who's in charge of your country and you don't know what to do. I'm just saying that Pastor Michael and I are about to record a conspiracy corner where we talk about how to live in a time where conspiracies seem to reign. So it might be useful to you if you ever find yourself in a position like that, hypothetically. But there's something that I think John Rich does that is actually really helpful in how we can continue to be unburdened by this. Because as Pastor Michael told me at the beginning of this episode, it's time to move on from this. The thing that John Rich says at the beginning of this is he says he came up with a secret rapture. And here's what I like about that terminology. And I actually had started trying to adopt this terminology before I heard this interview, but now I'm going all in on it. Because Pastor Michael pointed out two things. Some kind of form of premillennialism in church history, sometimes called Chileanism. There has been some kind of sense that maybe there will be a return of Christ, a continued life on earth before the end of all things. That has been discussed for a very long time. And a sudden return, right? These kinds of things. And Pastor and Michael and I have discussed our end times beliefs. And so it's not an incredulous position to have some kind of position like that.
Right.
So friends at Trinity, we love you. You aren't out of step with everything that's come before. Nor is it a strange and completely unheard of position to have some understanding of the importance of the basically the nation of Israel's or Jews. This is the thing that I found fascinating in the book, The Puritan Hope, which everyone told me would turn me into a post-millennial person. This plot twist there is it did not. It's a great book, by the way, by Ian Murray, though. So I think here's the thing we're going to do. First person, Pastor Michael, to join at the Mars Hill level, we will send a free copy of Rob Mckenzie's book after the release of this episode.
All right.
The first person to join at either the purely Presbyterian or the Reformer level will receive a free copy of The Puritan Hope. So there you go. We haven't done a giveaway in a long time. Welcome back, everybody.
There's a giveaway. Join the Patreon.
And we will draw, if you're an existing patron, we will draw someone from each of these tiers to win one of these things, because we're not leaving you guys out either.
That's right.
So, but what's fascinating is Ian Murray collects all of these pastoral prayers prayed by these Puritan ministers, and he's like, it is shocking how many times they prayed for the conversion of Israel in their prayers.
Yeah.
And that was a feature of their understanding of their duty as Christians.
Right.
And if they were going to pray the prayer at the end of Revelation, come Lord Jesus, they had to pray this prayer as well.
Mm-hmm.
That is it's fascinating, because obviously that is not widely practiced at all.
Right.
Now, the Westminster larger catechism tells us to pray for the conversion of the Jews as well.
It does. Correct.
So all I'm saying is there's all of these things we should, there are connections, there are ways of thinking about these things that probably we need to reconnect to. But here's what John Rich does. He says he came up with this teaching called the secret rapture. Now, here's what I like about that. So, Pastor Michael, after I, in college, unburdened myself of dispensationalism, I would tell people I don't believe in the rapture. Pastor Michael, do you know what
Of course you did.
do you know what the problem with telling people I didn't believe in the rapture was?
Because it's in the Bible, Matt.
Because 1 Thessalonians 4 uses the word rapture.
Yes, it does.
I was making the error the poor Arminians make when they say, I don't believe in predestination. I don't believe in election. And you go, dang, that's going to make reading Romans, Ephesians, 1 Peter, like rough, man.
It's going to make it really hard for you. That's right.
Now, the ESV translators, seeking to be themselves unburdened of the doctrine of the rapture, actually translated this verse in 1 Thessalonians a different way. Let me read the ESV translation. So he says, oh, no, sorry, I was looking at 5. That's why I was missing. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a crying command, the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of a trumpet, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, let us encourage each other with these words. Now, the King James Bible says, let me just pull up the King James translation, is where we get the word rapture. is translating a Greek word. Here is the King James version of that verse. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up. Wait, where did it got rid of the word rapture here? Anyways, so the Greek word there that underlies it is transliterated as rapture. And so the problem with saying you don't believe in the rapture is, well, you don't believe in this direct thing the Bible says. But saying you don't believe in the secret rapture, and actually I think the dispensationalists wisely and smartly did what I would say they tried to take the high ground. They said, we are going to say we believe in the rapture. And then when you ask, what does it mean to believe in the rapture? Then they start singing, the song, I wish we'd all been ready. Some of us have been left behind. They start singing that great DC Talk song. But what we need to do is we need to start using phrases like secret rapture. We need to start coming up with phrases that say, I'm defining your view as one view, but not all of them. And then when you come to the one place in the Bible where the word rapture is referenced, the question you can ask the person is, does this sound secret to you? Or is it describing Paul? Or is it the opposite of what Paul's saying? The Thessalonians who worry they might have missed the return of Christ. And Paul is saying,
says, you can't miss it.
You can't miss it.
That's literally the point.
And the dead didn't miss it because they will rise first, which is the wrong order.
Yes.
For the secret rapture. And that then they go, well, what about the proof text? There's that two men walking up the hill. One left is taken and one is remained. Those are great verses. Turn with the person to those verses in Luke and read about Jesus saying, it'll be just like it was in the day of Noah. And say, in the days of Noah, did you want to be the person left on earth or taken off the earth?
That's right.
They go, well, left on the earth. Yes.
Correct.
God's judgments sweep you off the earth. That's why the meek inherit the earth.
Yeah.
And so we need to learn to use language that makes them defend a position and help the person understand they are not articulating the position that has always been held. And so I think terms like referring to things like the secret rapture is a good way to start this definition. So there's my rant. There's the way
Matt believes that the Rothschilds. Just kidding. Hey, we don't know. Like, we seriously don't know. And I don't know. I mean, I don't care that much to, dig into that because it sounds like the kind of thing that most conspiracies are made of, which is connections that you don't actually have a full answer to.
Right.
That you actually can't. Like, it's not possible to fully make like a factual determination on something and then you build it into something else. That is not something that we necessarily care to do, at least not all the time. Sometimes it's fun, but to speculate, but we on a real level, if we don't know, we don't know. And so we're not going to speculate on that part. Now, what's interesting is obviously somebody like Tucker Carlson just uses this particularly to talk about the consequences of this.
That's right. He has a foreign policy interest.
Yes, that's right. And that's an interesting take. And we've talked about this when we've talked about dispensationalism in the past, when we talked about Zionism in the past, and some of these things that, especially after that Mark Driscoll sermon. So what we can say, what I think is important to at least say is theology has consequences.
Yes.
Right? Like what you believe, you might think, well, I'm just having a discussion about what the Bible teaches. And you might be right, but what you believe is going to play out in your life, and not just in your life, right? When you have power and influence, when you have a position of authority, the things that you believe are going to lead to the kinds of things that you do, the policies you enact. When you believe something as a nation, when a majority of people believe something, it's going to affect the kinds of things they celebrate, the kinds of things that they are upset about. It will drive political opinions. And so
Right.
we need to be careful that actually, yes, what we are doing is studying the Word of God and understanding the truth of it, not building our own systems and then forcing those upon the text.
Well, this has been your invitation into the Conspiracy Corner. We hope you'll join us. We hope you give this show 5 stars. And we hope you will give us many stars. If you would like to share with us your favorite conspiracies for us to cover in Conspiracy Corner, we'd like to welcome you to do that. But thanks for listening.